The sun was barely climbing over the mesas when I slung my rifle across my shoulder and rode out. The chill of dawn still hung in the air, and the desert wind carried that dry, whispering sound that always reminded me how alone a man could be out here. I wasn't looking for trouble that morning, just meat. The winter had been long and the traps were coming up empty. My horse Dusty snorted clouds of steam as we headed east toward the canyon, where I'd often seen elk tracks near the stream bed. Hours passed. The sun rose higher and the gold of dawn turned to the white blaze of noon. The earth shimmered with heat and my throat burned with dust. I was about ready to turn back when I saw the vultures circling low in the distance. My gut tightened. That meant something was dying out there. I kicked Dusty into a trot, not sure what I was riding toward. When I reached the rise, I saw her. At first I thought it was a fallen deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman, an Apache woman, lying face down in the sand. Her clothes were torn, her skin bruised, and she wasn't moving. I slid off my horse and knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. There it was, a faint pulse. Easy now, I murmured more to myself than to her. Her lips moved, whispering something in Apache I didn't understand. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. I pulled my canteen from my belt and lifted her head gently, pouring a few drops of water onto her lips. She flinched, then drank greedily, trembling as she did. The sight of her made my chest tighten. She looked barely alive, like she'd run from hell itself. There were rope burns on her wrists and blood dried on her knees. Whatever happened, she'd been through something no one should face alone. I looked around. The sand showed prints, boot prints, and wagon ruts leading west. Probably bounty hunters or drunken ranch hands who'd taken what they wanted and left her to die. I didn't owe her anything. A man in the Wild West couldn't save everyone he came across. But as I stood there under the burning sky, something in her eyes stopped me. Even half dead, her stare was fierce, defiant, like a wild thing that refused to break. So I lifted her up, awkwardly but carefully, and set her across my saddle. She didn't weigh much, just bones and spirit. "Guess it's you and me now," I muttered, climbing up behind her. We rode slow, the horse's hooves kicking up dust that caught the dying sunlight. Every few minutes I felt her head slump against my chest, and every time it did I told myself to keep her awake, to keep her breathing. By the time we reached my cabin, night had swallowed the desert. Coyotes howled in the distance as I pushed open the door and carried her inside. The fire was still cold, the kind that hadn't seen a flame in days. I laid her down on the cot and struck a match, lighting the old lantern hanging from a beam. Her skin gleamed in the flicker, streaked with dust and bruises. I found an old blanket, tore it in half, and covered her. Then I heated water and began cleaning her wounds, slow and careful. When she stirred, her eyes flicked open, deep brown, sharp, alert despite everything. She looked at me like I was another danger waiting to happen. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said softly. "You're safe now." She didn't answer. Her eyes followed every move I made. I could feel her fear and her mistrust. In her world, men like me had brought nothing but pain. She spoke a few words I couldn't understand, but her tone was clear. She was asking why I'd saved her. I shrugged. "Didn't seem right leaving you out there for the buzzards." For a long while, neither of us said a word. Only the crackle of fire filled the silence. I poured her a tin cup of broth and handed it to her. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers shook as she drank, but I saw the life coming back into her little by little. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her lying there in the sand, helpless and yet somehow stronger than anything I'd ever met. Something about her stirred something I'd long buried under years of loneliness and loss. I didn't know her name, didn't know what she'd suffered or who had done this to her. But I knew one thing: finding her wasn't chance. It felt like the desert itself had led me to her. When morning came, I stepped outside. The sky was red, the kind of red that paints everything in promise and warning. I breathed deep, felt the weight of the rifle on my shoulder, and the heavier weight of what I'd brought home. Inside, I heard her stirring. She was awake, trying to stand, her body trembling with weakness. I stepped back in quickly. "Take it easy," I said. "You're safe here. Rest." She looked at me, eyes narrowing, still uncertain. Her lips parted. This time her voice came clearer, though rough. "Why, help me." I paused, then smiled faintly. "Because sometimes a man goes hunting for meat and finds something he didn't know he needed. She stared at me for a long time, as if trying to decide whether to believe those words. Then she sank back onto the cot, her eyes softening just a little. That's how it began. The day I went looking for food and found a soul instead. A wild, broken, beautiful soul who would change the course of my life forever. Morning light spilled through the cracks in the wooden walls, painting the cabin in streaks of gold. I stood by the window, watching the desert wake, the horizon shimmering under a rising sun, the wind whispering across the sagebrush. Behind me I could hear her breathing, slow and steady now. She was healing. It had been 3 days since I found her in the sand. 3 days since I'd brought her back from death's edge. I'd cleaned her wounds, shared what little food I had, and watched her fight her way back to life. But not once had she told me her name. Every time our eyes met, there was something unspoken. A wall between us, built from years of mistrust and pain. I didn't blame her. White men had taken her land, her people, her peace. To her, I was part of that same storm. That morning, when she finally sat up and looked around the cabin, she spoke quietly, voice hoarse but strong enough to carry. My name, Nita. Nita, I repeated softly, the word feeling like music in a place where only silence used to live. Name's Eli. She nodded once. Then in that same quiet strength, she said, You help me, I go. I frowned. Go? You can barely stand, let alone walk through the desert. She turned her face away, stubborn as the rocks outside. My people think I dead. I find them. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. You try leaving now, you'll be dead. The desert doesn't care who you are. Her eyes flashed. Desert my home, she said sharply. That was the first time I saw the fire in her. The same fire that must have kept her alive out there. I wanted to argue, but something in her tone made me stop. She wasn't just some lost woman. She was a survivor. A warrior stripped of everything except her pride. So I didn't stop her. I helped her stand, though she leaned on me more than she'd admit. I gave her a blanket, a small knife, and a canteen. At least wait till sundown, I said. Travel at night, less heat. She nodded once, then sat back down by the fire. That small flicker of trust between us. It was something fragile but real. As the hours passed, she began to talk more, haltingly in broken English, telling pieces of what had happened. Raiders had attacked her camp. Her husband killed. She'd been taken by men who traded lives like cattle. She escaped, ran for days until the desert took her strength. Every word cut deep. I'd seen men like that before, heartless, lawless. The kind who turned the frontier into a graveyard of lost souls. When she finished, she sat in silence, staring into the fire. I could see the weight she carried, pain, anger, loneliness, and something else. The need to keep living. That night, I made her a promise. No one's gonna hurt you again, Nita, not while I'm breathing. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the flames. Why you care? She asked quietly. I hesitated. Out here caring got you killed. But the truth was simple. Because I've been lost too, I said. And sometimes the only way to find yourself is to help someone else get home. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened just a little. Days turned into weeks. Nita stayed, helping around the cabin, tending the fire, gathering herbs, cooking what little we hunted. She moved quietly, like the desert wind, graceful and strong, yet always watching, always guarded. We never said much, but the silence between us began to change. It wasn't the cold, empty kind anymore. It was the kind filled with meaning. The kind where two people didn't need words to understand each other. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. When I mended the fence or chopped wood, or sat outside staring at the horizon, and I'd find myself doing the same, drawn to her calm strength. One evening, as the sky turned crimson and the coyotes sang in the distance, she walked out and stood beside me. The wind caught her hair, lifting it like black silk. You miss your people? I asked quietly. She nodded. Always. I looked down. You could leave. I wouldn't stop you. She turned to me, eyes steady. You saved my life. My heart say stay, but my blood say go. That line hit me hard. There are two kinds of love in this world. The kind you choose, and the kind you fight against because you know it can't last. That night we sat by the fire again. The silence between us was thick with things unsaid. I wanted to reach out, to tell her she didn't have to face this world alone. But I knew the desert didn't give mercy easily, and neither did life. The next morning, the sound of hooves shattered the calm. I stepped out, rifle in hand. 3 men rode up, Rough faces, mean eyes. I knew the type. Raiders or worse. The leader spat into the dust. "We're looking for a redskin woman," he said. "Ran from us a few weeks back. You seen her?" My heart pounded. Nita was inside. I could feel her watching from the shadows. I looked that man dead in the eye. "Ain't seen nobody but jackrabbits and ghosts out here." He sneered. "You sure about that?" Before I could answer, his gaze shifted to the door where a faint movement betrayed her. Everything slowed. My finger tightened on the trigger. The man reached for his gun, but I was faster. One shot rang out, echoing through the canyon. His hat flew off as he fell from the saddle. The others hesitated, then turned tail and rode hard, dust swallowing them whole. When it was over, I stood there shaking. Nita stepped out slowly, her face pale. "You kill for me," she whispered. I lowered my rifle. "I didn't kill for you," I said quietly. "I killed to stop the kind of men I used to be." She looked at me for a long time, then stepped closer. Her hand reached out, small, trembling, and rested on mine. "You good man, Eli," she said softly. "Desert test your heart. You pass." In that moment, something changed. The desert wind grew still, and all the noise in my head, all the loneliness and regret, faded into silence. I looked at her and realized she wasn't just someone I'd saved. She was someone who'd saved me right back. A week later, when her strength returned, Nita told me she needed to go. Her people were waiting somewhere beyond the red hills. I didn't stop her this time. I packed her food, filled her canteen, and saddled Dusty for the ride. As she mounted the horse, I felt the ache of goodbye deep in my chest. "You'll find your people," I said. "Tell them the desert's still got a few good men left." She smiled, the first true smile I'd seen from her. "And you," she said, "find peace." Then she rode off into the golden dawn, her silhouette fading into the horizon. I stood there until she disappeared, the desert wind brushing my face like her final whisper. That night I sat by the fire alone again, but the loneliness felt different now, softer, almost peaceful. Because somewhere out there, under the same stars, I knew Nita was alive. And though the world would call me a fool for risking my life for a stranger, I'd do it again because that's what mercy is. Sometimes the greatest hunt a man can take is the one that teaches him how to be human again.